Welcome everyone to another episode of Q&A with Sharon's son George. I was my mother's caretaker after she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Unfortunately, she passed on 1/1/2020, and we started together for Sharon.com in her memory. Today we have one of the, my opinion, most special guests, not just because he's been such an incredible mentor to me, even though he might not realize it, but he's really, when you call, he's there, which is very important. He's really out there working for everyone out there on Parkinson's disease awareness, but also hope for a cure, so many other areas. So I want to welcome Dr. Ray Dorsey. He's a neurologist, professor at Rochester, and author of the book Ending Parkinson's Disease, which is what I have right in front of me. And it's, very important to me too that everybody reaches out. So again, welcome, doctor.
Yes, everyone calls me Ray. And George, the people who change the course of these diseases are people who are most directly affected. And sometimes we think it's just those people who have the disease, but it's oftentimes the friends and family of people around them. I think it's worth thinking, like, one of the great public health movements of the 20th century was Mothers Against Drunk Driving, was started by Candace Lightner, whose daughter was killed by a drunk driver while walking. And 4 days later, she started lobbying and actually forming what Mothers Against Drunk Driving came to be. Ended up making drinking and driving illegal in all 50 states and raising the drinking age, and saved 10,000 fewer people a year die in drinking and driving accidents. 10,000 fewer people a year because of the actions of Candace Lightner, who only took the action after her daughter was killed. So it's people like you, even after the passing of your wonderful mother and your outstanding book on your mother, who will change the course of Parkinson's disease. I couldn't be happier to be joining you here 2 days before World Parkinson's Disease Day.
I really appreciate it. I know you have a very busy schedule, so we'll get right to it. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and also what brought you into the world of medicine and Parkinson's disease.
I'm the product of two psychiatrists, and so I like to say I rebelled and I became a neurologist. During neurology training, you have the good fortune and care for a wide variety of individuals in a wide variety of settings. And when I did a rotation at the University of Pennsylvania with Dr. Matt Stern, Dr. Howard Herdig, Dr. Andrew Sidoroff, and many other outstanding neurologists, I really came to like caring for people with Parkinson's disease. I've always I had a great grandmother, and I've enjoyed interacting with older people, learn a lot from them. And that, with people with Parkinson's, you can make them better. And now I increasingly realize not only can you make people with Parkinson's better, but you can prevent older people from ever getting Parkinson's disease, because Parkinson's disease is largely a preventable disease. Parkinson's is largely a preventable disease. We need not cure it. That would be great, but we can prevent people from ever developing this disease for future generations, so that people live in a world largely free of it, just like we live in a world largely free of polio.
Nice. I heard you give a lecture recently, and it was really specifically on dieting. And also, I wanted to hear your thoughts of the causes of Parkinson's, such as environment, because I feel my mother definitely, again, I'm not a researcher in the field of medicine, but she lived in a beautiful home for 20 years. Unfortunately, it had termites, it had mold, and other who knows what they sprayed. So she had no other health issues, so I think it's a big cause of that. But I'd like to know, maybe in your expert opinion, what are some of the causes of Parkinson?
I think there are three major principal environmental causes of Parkinson's disease, and they are: one, certain pesticides. The poster child for this is paraquat. It's a weed killer that's created in the 1950s, been used since the 1960s. It kills the weeds that Roundup doesn't. It's been used to commit homicide and suicide. The EPA's own website says one sip can kill, yet the EPA reauthorized its use in the United States last month, I believe. Use of paraquat, which is banned in China and 30 other countries, has more than doubled in the last 5 years, for which we have data. I think it's unconscionable that we still are doing it. The company, according to the documents reviewed by The Guardian, engaged in what they called a freedom to sell. And I think their freedom to sell campaign has been a freedom to harm and a freedom to possibly even kill individuals who've suffered from Parkinson's disease. And as you may know, Parkinson's disease is now the 14th leading cause of death in the United States. 100 Americans will die with the disease today. and we should be outraged at that paraquat is still on the market, and be outraged that a company is allowed to continue to sell this product in the United States, even though countries like England ban it, but export it to the US. The next major cause are dry cleaning chemicals. Some of your people know about this chemical called trichloroethylene. It's a really simple molecule. Most of your listeners know that water is made up of 3 molecules, 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. This is made up of 6, 2 carbons in black, 1 hydrogen in white, and 3 green atoms chlorine, hence its name trichloroethylene. It and its cousin perchloroethylene has 1 additional chlorine atom, are the same chemicals that have contaminated the marine-based Camp Lejeune, and that's why you hear a lot of ads about Camp Lejeune. But this chemical is contaminated thousands of sites throughout the United States. It contaminated Woburn, Massachusetts, as depicted in the book and movie Civil Action, contaminated Toms River, New Jersey, it's contaminated 15 Superfund sites in Silicon Valley alone, contaminated sites from Rochester to Newport Beach, California, and around the world. It's associated with a 500% increased risk of Parkinson's disease, and when either inhaled or fed to animals, they develop the clinical and pathological features of Parkinson's disease. And then the third is air pollution. So outdoor air pollution, either from industrial sources or automobile traffic, has been increasingly linked to Parkinson's and to Alzheimer's disease. When Dr. Parkinson described Parkinson's disease in 1817, air pollution in London was terrible. It was 20 times worse than it is today. It's akin to what people in Beijing and Delhi, India breathe in on a daily basis, and akin to what many North Americans experienced last summer from the Canadian wildfires. So 3 major environmental contributions, pesticides, including paraquat, as well as certain other ones like chlorpyrifos, industrial chemicals like trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene, and air pollution.
Well, thank you. So much information. And as an attorney and a son who lost their loved one due to Parkinson's, I'm shocked that this is still even allowed. But again, hopefully we'll make some progress now that the National Plan to End Parkinson's Disease is heading to the Senate, hopefully shortly. So thank you for that. I have a question in between here. Who helps you in times of not struggle, but, I know it's not easy all the time to be, I imagine if my mother and I came to you, it would have been a tough conversation, especially towards the end, but who's there to help you through the tough times?
So I have a great family. I have a wife of 28 years.
Congratulations. I'm
And
a
we have
little
4
bit.
wonderful boys. But it's hard. Listen, only 2 cents of every research dollar for Parkinson's is spent on prevention. That has to change, or we're going to have more and more people with the disease. Even some of my colleagues who are outstanding have skeptical of my thoughts on the subject, and the thought that I think Parkinson's disease is largely preventable. I take my inspiration from Dr. Caroline Tanner, who's a neurologist, a Parkinson's specialist, and an epidemiologist, has a PhD in epidemiology from the University of California, Berkeley. Our book, Ending Parkinson's Disease, is largely a reflection of the research that she's been done for the last 40 years. So she's an inspiration. And then this may sound odd, but I get pissed off when I see people with Parkinson's disease, because I think their Parkinson's is preventable. And suffering might be part of the human condition, but needless preventable suffering need not be. And I think Parkinson's disease is largely preventable. I think it's due to environmental toxins in our food, water, and air, especially those that are inhaled and ingested. If we get rid of those toxins in our food, water, and air, we get rid of Parkinson's disease. If we get rid of the toxins in our food, water, and air, we get rid of Parkinson's disease. We give future generations a world where Parkinson's disease is increasingly rare, not increasingly common. And that gives me plenty of fuel to fire my engines, hopefully for many years to come.
I appreciate the honesty. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, so we're always honest on the show, no matter what. We don't want to hide any of the truth. And some of the areas I focus on are tackling tough topics. So I really appreciate that. Shifting a little bit to the book, because I actually, again, read it, even though I work 24/7 and have a lot going on. I felt that the second I heard about the book, it was so important to really, for myself and for the viewers, to get out there and go grab a copy. But how did that book come about? I know you mentioned from some of your colleagues, but maybe you could talk a little bit about, just how you thought of the book, how you collaborated, and then finally, after that, maybe we could talk about some specific chapters.
So in 2017 was the bicentennial of Dr. James Parkinson's seminal description of Parkinson's disease. And I was with my colleague Bas Bloom at a Parkinson's event. And we started talking about the growth of Parkinson's disease. And I think we threw around the term the Parkinson's epidemic, and even wrote a little piece on that for JAMA Neurology. And then the section editor of JAMA Neurology is Michael Oken. And he goes, guys, not the Parkinson epidemic, it's the Parkinson's pandemic. It's covering the entire world. And so that piece resonated in the community. And then we reached out to our friend Todd Scher at the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And then the four of us, Drs. Oken, Bloom, and Scher, and I wrote this book. I had the gift of a sabbatical as an academic at the University of Rochester, and I spent my sabbatical reading the great works of Dr. Caroline Tanner, who for 40 years for over 25 years has told us that Parkinson's is predominantly an environmental condition, and for 40 years has detailed the risk that pesticides, including paraquat, and other pesticides, the risk that trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene, and the risk of air pollution linked to Parkinson's disease. And as I read more of her work and the work of people like Dr. Beata Ritz and Jeff Bronstein and many others, I really came to say, well, they're right. And we know that Parkinson's, we've known for 100 years that the vast majority of people with Parkinson's don't have a family history of the disease, and the vast majority of people don't have an identifiable genetic risk factor. And for those who do, like they have a LRRK2 or GBA mutation, then most of them will never develop Parkinson's disease. So you couldn't have much better evidence of the limited role that genetics plays in Parkinson's disease than what we have now. And so we started writing, and we wrote the book over 2 years. It came out in 2020, shortly after your mother's passing at the height of the COVID pandemic. So it was kind of subsumed by that. But fortunately, because of people like you, it's become increasingly known. Just a few notes, all the authors are donating all their proceeds to efforts to prevent and end Parkinson's. So all of us, Todd, Michael, Bas, and I are devoting all of our proceeds from the book to efforts to end Parkinson's disease. People can buy it on Amazon, they can get it from the library. If they can't afford a copy, if they just email us at info@endingpd.org, info@endingpd.org. We'll send them a free copy. Just include your preferred mailing address, especially if it's the United States, and we'll send you a free copy of the book.
That's amazing to be able to offer that. And I liked all the chapters, like cleaning up, protecting ourselves, taking care. But one thing that I think the viewers would love, and they should get the copy, is the prescription for action. Because a lot of time I even cater my book a lot about, lessons I learned reading your book. And you have to have some type of action. We have books, but we don't have something the viewers and the readers can actually, take act, and it's kind of lost. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the steps, which I memorized, but I'd rather you discuss because I really like my name's Ackerman, so, and it's always the acronyms that that's how I studied for the bar exam. I wouldn't have ever passed if it wasn't for secret acronyms. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the prescription.
So the prescription is focused on 4 things. Michael Oken gets the credit for this: PACT, P-A-C-T. What can you do to prevent, advocate, care, and treat the condition? And to me, the biggest thing is around preventing. And so we need to ban these pesticides, including paraquat. There's another pesticide called chlorpyrifos sprayed in indoor homes, estimated to cost 25 million American children, 17 million IQ points. So we're spraying pesticides that are damaging the intellectual abilities of the future generations. That needs to stop. We need to ban perchloroethylene and trichloroethylene. The EPA has proposed a ban on perchloroethylene and trichloroethylene. Dr. Michael Friedhoff at the EPA gets a lot of credit for doing that, but that ban is a proposal and has not been fully implemented, and doesn't address the thousands of contaminated sites that are throughout the country, including ones 10 minutes from where I'm sitting right here in Rochester, New York. We need to clean up our air. I think it's a major risk factor depending on where you live. For example, if you're in Los Angeles, I think air pollution is a major factor, not just for Parkinson's, but for Alzheimer's disease. And there's tons of things that we as individuals can do. So since writing the book, I buy organic. I'm a doctor, so I have the means to do so. But I wash all my produce, even organic ones, with water and a vegetable wash. I put a carbon filter like Pure or Brita on my water at home to decrease my exposure. Our yard has plenty of dandelions, so we avoid pesticides in all its forms. I wear a helmet when I bicycle. It's a beautiful day in Rochester, so I bike to work today, and so I wear a helmet. So I think there are thousands of things. I avoid dry cleaning. I minimize dry cleaning. I go to dry cleaners that don't use perchloroethylene. So I think there are thousands of things that we can do all in our everyday life to prevent people from ever developing this disease.
As you speak, I might have to remove my jacket.
It's, so we laugh about dry cleaning, and so it turns out that dry cleaning chemicals are obviously in the clothes, and they're off gas. They release it. So if you pick up your dry cleaning from the dry cleaner and you put in your car, you'll be breathing in those chemicals on your way home. So if you do get dry cleaning, it's good to air it out outside, take the bag off and let it air out. It turns out that people who live in apartment buildings in New York City above a dry cleaner will have unsafe levels in some apartments of these dry cleaning chemicals in their indoor air, and they don't even know it. And because the chemicals dissolve in fat and therefore might be in your fatty brain, they're found in the butter and then the cheese in the refrigerator. So you could be eating the chemicals in your apartment above a dry cleaner in New York City or other locations. This is, I think, just a largely untold story about how many people may have their Parkinson's due to trichloroethylene and perchloroethylene and not even know about it. We've highlighted a little bit of that in a paper we've really recently written, and we're going to discuss that more in an upcoming symposium on the brain and the environment.
Thank you. I'm going to just share the screen for a moment and a few of your incredible work. So here we go. So first, again, I want to thank you for doing our interview a few months ago together for Sharon.com and just trying to spread awareness also for a cure. But if anyone would like to see his interview, Dr. or Ray, I still like Dr. Dorsey, but please visit Together for Sharon, click interviews, and you'll see a lot about how to reach out to Ray. Also, we have some other important areas, and this is, I had a question since I'm also in the education field. How long have you been teaching, and what's one of your favorite moments as a professor?
Wow. I finished my neurology training in 2005 and then finished movement disorders training in 2007. So 17 years as an academic. Favorite teaching moment?
I have some, but
wow. Well, so what's your favorite teaching moment?
really, it's I had a story once. A student wrote me and said, I do a lot of online work too, and I do a lot of positive statements just because, we might lose some students because it gets tough. But they said, Professor, on an email, you used to send all these positive things every day, and I thought it was spam, so I used to get upset. But then one day, unfortunately, my loved one passed, and I was going to give up literally at school and everything in your class. And I received one of those, positive affirmations, and I'm standing here right now with my diploma. So I want to thank you. So that's one of the ones that really pushes me to keep enjoying, profession of teaching. Obviously, we don't do that for the money. We do it for the passion. At least I think.
So I'll say two things. One, I love, just like you, I love to see the success of the people that I've had the privilege to mentor. And so many of them are doctors and many of them are going through the training process. So that's very rewarding. I also think about like what is the essence of a professor, and so professor comes from the word profess, and so what are professors supposed to do? And they're supposed to tell the truth, and they're supposed to tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unpopular, and maybe especially so when it's uncomfortable and when it's unpopular. And it's not popular to go around saying that chemical companies, some of them knowingly, according to The Guardian, are releasing chemicals into the environment that likely cause or certainly raise the risk of Parkinson's disease. It's not popular, doesn't win me many friends, and it certainly invites lots of attorneys, I think unnecessary attorneys to my attention. But that's what we're supposed to do. And that's why you have tenure, so that you have the freedom to say things that are unpopular. And I think it's really, really, really important that we think about that, because there are people who are not engaged in science, not engaged in production of knowledge. Some companies are engaged in the production of ignorance. We've seen that with tobacco companies. We've seen that with social media companies. We've seen that with the opioid crisis, that companies knowingly are introducing products or services into the environment, into society that are harmful, and they deliberately conceal the risk of those products or services from the public. And that leads to all of us paying a really, really high price for their actions. And we should hold wrongdoers accountable. If we don't hold wrongdoers accountable, they only become emboldened, and we continue to see wrongdoers become increasingly emboldened and pushing the envelope as to what's acceptable. And we need to stand up as a community within the Parkinson's community and the society at large and say this is not acceptable, and start naming who these individuals are, what these companies are doing, why law firms that have represented tobacco companies are now representing social media companies, are now representing chemical companies, and why these companies are being protected from the actions that they have taken to the detriment of now millions of people with Parkinson's disease around the world.
Yeah, I did a law degree, police, and 3 masters, but speaking to you makes me want to go back to medical. That's the only school I didn't do. My father's an MD and I let him take that. But I appreciate the response. Here's an important website, everyone. Again, endingpd.org. This is the best site. I actually visit a lot. You can even subscribe. I just got a newsletter today, and then I always share a lot of those important articles like the environment, like Paraguay. And I actually tried to reach out to a few law firms to see if they'll talk about that, and they've not gotten great responses. It seems like, unfortunately, they don't either want to talk about it or they are just looking to sue somebody, which is not always, the way to go, because we need to have these discussions. This is, again, where you can also go to order the book. So I don't know
They
if
can go order the book, and they can join our news. If you go to the site, you can get our newsletter, subscribe for newsletter. It's entirely free to do so. You can order the book if you have the means to do so. All proceeds go to the efforts to prevent and end Parkinson's disease. If you can't afford the book, you just email us at info@endingpd.org. And if you have a story or you have questions or comments, or you find something I said it was wrong, or you want to correct me, just email me at info@endingpd.org.
And then I know you mentioned something exciting coming up as a big symposium. Maybe you can touch on that, called the Brain and Environment.
Yeah, so as I said, I think there are toxins in our food, water, and air that are contributing to Parkinson's disease. And I don't think that those toxins are limited to just Parkinson's disease. The more I read, the more concerned I get that these same toxins, especially pesticides, dry cleaning chemicals, and degreasing chemicals, and air pollution, are linked to ALS, linked to Alzheimer's disease, linked to intellectual disabilities, linked to autism, linked to brain cancer. And so we're putting together this symposium in Washington, D.C. on May 20th to highlight the role that these toxins in our food, water, and air are playing in brain diseases from autism to Alzheimer's disease, so we can take action as a society to prevent future generations from ever suffering for these conditions.
Will this symposium be just live or also virtual?
We're planning to record it. So it's live in person in Washington, D.C. If you want, you can go to our website, brainandenvironment.org, and RSVP is currently free to do so. And then it'll be recorded. We're planning to record it, and then we'll obviously distribute that out for people.
Yeah, I'd love to share that to everybody also. A few last questions. Do you see a cure coming in the future, or potentially any time soon? I know I was waiting on my hands and knees, unfortunately, when my mother, just kept getting worse, but maybe, I don't know if you can even comment on that.
I think we're trying to cure a preventable disease. And, we don't have a cure for polio, but we have a means of preventing people from ever getting the disease in the first place. I think we talked about, COVID. We don't have a cure for COVID, but we can prevent people from ever getting COVID. We talked about Candace Lightner. She didn't say, we need, after her daughter was killed, she didn't say we need better emergency rooms or better trauma centers or spinal cord rehab or better trained EMTs, all of which may be true. She said we need to stop drinking and driving because that's the root cause of why her daughter died. And we're only spending 2 cents of every dollar on addressing the root cause of why people are getting Parkinson's disease. If we address the root causes, not only do we prevent future generations from getting disease, but if we identify what these root causes are, we can more efficiently study drugs aimed at these root causes of the disease. And then third, we can prevent people from getting ongoing exposure to certain pesticides, dry cleaning chemicals, and air pollution that might slow the rate of progression of disease, might even modify the disease course. I'll just give you an example. You know, if a smoker comes to a doctor and is diagnosed with lung cancer, what's the first thing the doctor's going to say? Stop smoking. But we're not saying that for people with Parkinson's. We don't say stop getting exposed to nerve toxins in your environment. We don't tell them to stop spraying pesticides on their yard. We don't tell them to buy organic. We don't tell them to wash their fruits and vegetables. We don't tell them to decrease their exposure to air pollution, which is associated with an increased risk of hospitalization among people with Parkinson's disease. We don't tell them to stop dry cleaning their clothes. We don't tell them to do lots of things that likely could change the course of their disease, because we just haven't been trained to do that. We are not trained in American medicine to look at what the root causes of the disease are. We're trained to treat people with the disease, and that's fine. But until we address the root causes, we don't prevent people from continuing to develop the disease. I'll give you a simple analogy. Sometimes doctors are reviewed as repair shops. And if cars keep coming in with flat tires, you know, you can repair the tires. But at some point in time, someone's got to say, what's wrong with the roads? And that's what we're trying to do here, is say, what's wrong with the roads? What's wrong with our environment that's causing Parkinson's to be the world's fastest growing brain disease, causing 200 people to be diagnosed, 200 Americans to be diagnosed with the disease today, and likely thousands worldwide. We can change the course of this disease if we take actions to clean up our food, water, and air. And in doing so, we'll likely prevent lots of other brain diseases, enable people to live longer, healthier, more independent lives. I can't think of a better goal for us to do as a community.
Thank you. And how do you think research has advanced in the last 10 years, in your expert opinion?
Well, you know, we wrote in our book and in subsequent papers that I think we failed the Parkinson's community. Listen, the Michael J. Fox Foundation has raised something like $2 billion in research money to advance research. And we've advanced understanding of genetics, and we've advanced our understanding of some of the pathology of Parkinson's disease, but we've made no major therapeutic breakthroughs this century. We have failed the Parkinson's community, and I put myself in that category. We have failed the Parkinson's community because the most effective treatments are treatments like levodopa and deep brain stimulation, which were developed in the 20th century, not in this century. I think we need to expand our orientation beyond just trying to pursue treatments and cures, to thinking about what are the root causes of the disease and to prevent people from getting this disease in the first place. The first response to any crisis, any pandemic, whether it's your house on fire or infectious disease spreading through a country, is to contain it. And we are not containing the growth of Parkinson's disease. If we're allowing a pesticide that China has banned that's associated with a 150% increased risk of Parkinson's disease continue to be sprayed on fields in Western New York and around the country, then we're not taking the actions that are necessary to prevent future generations from getting this disease. And if we're not taking the actions in the United States, think about what actions aren't happening in other parts of the world. You know, pesticide use has only increased linearly over the last 50 years. It's increasingly used in parts of the world where it was once rare, like Africa, where use of pesticides has tripled, I think, in the last 25 years. And 60% of the population in Africa works in agriculture. So we're planting the seeds of Parkinson's in Africa among a very young population, and likely setting the stage for a large number of people to develop Parkinson's disease generations from now, because we are not willing to take and have not taken the actions necessary to hold wrongdoers accountable. And unless we hold wrongdoers accountable, they will only introduce more and more dangerous products and services into our environment.
Speaking of future generations, let's go back to this medical. What if you're approached by, which you probably are, a new medical student who wants to research a cure or get into the same field in neurology? What would you advise them to? Is that a good thing to do? Like, I'm not sure what kind of response. You probably get that a lot, though.
I would tell them, why don't we think about preventing disease?
Okay.
No one is thinking about preventing disease. 2 cents of every research dollar. I'll put it another way. There are homes in South Florida that are sold this year for more than we as a nation spend on preventing Parkinson's disease.
Yeah.
There are homes.
Unfortunately, I reside there. That's where I am, in South Florida.
In South Florida, that are being sold for more than we as a society spend on the world to try to prevent the world's fastest growing brain disease. If that doesn't change, and if you've just had Parkinson's disease, it doesn't, you all know that your children are 2 to 4 times higher risk of developing Parkinson's disease. These subsequent generations are likely to develop the same disease that that people have already suffered with in this generation. We increasingly have the knowledge. It's incumbent upon us, when we have that knowledge, to take action on it. Stop giving the benefit of the doubt to chemicals, start giving the benefit of the doubt to people, and start taking action to prevent diseases. I mean, we do this for other things. You know, if someone has a stroke, we try to figure out why they had a stroke so we can prevent them from having a second stroke. If someone has a seizure, we try to figure out why they have a seizure so we can prevent them from having a seizure. If someone has a headache, we try to figure out why they have a headache so we can prescribe the right therapy. It's only with like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease and ALS that we view this as some fait accompli, that there isn't a way that we can address actually the root causes and change the course of the disease. Even in ALS, there have been cases of people developing early weakness in their limbs that were found to be linked to pesticide exposure. They stopped the pesticide exposure and they got stronger. I mean, we are not doing the research necessary to change the course of the disease for people with the disease, and we're not doing the research necessary to prevent people from developing the disease, and we are completely too silent among our community of 1.2 million Americans in terms of allowing wrongdoers to get away with actions that are likely sowing the seeds of future cases of Parkinson's disease. Thank
you. What is one memorable moment, or the most memorable that stands out throughout all your work with awareness? I'll put you on the Barbara Walters spot here.
Goodness gracious.
We could always come back. We only have a few more.
Well, I'll tell you, so I was reading Brian Grant's great autobiography. Brian Grant, former NBA basketball player. He and I were actually born one day apart, and I think about 30 or 40 miles apart in Ohio. And at the end of his book, he talks that he was a 3-year-old boy at Camp Lejeune when his father was based there as a Marine. And then his father dies from esophageal cancer linked to the dry cleaning chemicals that contaminated the Marine base. His younger brother also had medical conditions. And then, you know, he actually played likely an NBA season with Parkinson's disease. Didn't play very well, but I played an NBA season with Parkinson's disease and then develops it himself. I mean, to me, here it was, you know, someone, a 3-year-old boy at Camp Lejeune, 35 years later, develops Parkinson's disease. And as some of you viewers know, Marines who served at Camp Lejeune when they were 20 have a 70% increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease 35 years later. I mean, if we're doing this to our best and brightest, you know, when's the craziness going to end? I mean, what will be enough? I mean, we're doing this to children, we're doing this to Marines, we're doing this to veterans, we're doing this to women, we're doing this to children. At some point, action just needs to end, and we need to change the course of these diseases, lest we all increasingly get affected by them.
If you were asked to write a script to a movie about your life story, what would you call it? You can even say, what if we put the book into a movie?
Yeah, well, my life story is boring. So we'll,
are you a basketball player? I know you said you're 6'5". Do you play, or?
I'd like to play basketball. I think the greatest gift neurologists can give is to a world where their diseases don't exist in the future. You know, Jonas Salk helped us create a world where polio largely doesn't exist. Candace Lightner helped us create a world where 10,000 fewer children, 10,000 fewer schools, communities are affected every year by drinking and driving. Larry Kramer, an AIDS activist, changed the course of HIV, and millions of us don't have HIV because of their actions. And actually, some of the beauty of it, their action and Candace Lightner's, we don't know who those individuals are. It could be you, it could be me, it could be both of us. It could be our spouses, it could be our children. These are great gifts that we can give to future generations. And we need to get a lot more ambitious as a community and start thinking, what are the gifts that we're going to give to future generations? You have an obligation to receive a gift, and you have an obligation to reciprocate. We've received the gift of a world largely free of polio. We've received a gift of a world where drinking and driving is socially unacceptable. We've received a gift where HIV is both preventable and treatable. It is time that we as a community reciprocate. World Parkinson's disease is coming up in 2 days. Why don't we take a pact as a community to ensure that future generations are less affected by Parkinson's disease than we are today?
And on a final note, if you could leave the Parkinson's community today with some words of encouragement, what would those be? It
is the actions of ordinary people who are most directly affected by the disease who change the course of diseases. It is not neurologists, it is not scientists, it is not policymakers. It is the actions of ordinary citizens most directly affected by the disease who know, in the words of Brian Grant, the words of Michael J. Fox, that Parkinson's disease sucks. And those individuals know firsthand how much Parkinson's disease sucks. And if they make their voices heard, if they change the course of the disease, if they hold chemical companies who are manufacturing pesticides and selling pesticides that are associated with 150% increased risk of Parkinson's disease, if they hold them accountable, if they call their representatives, their senators, and say we need to ban paraquat today, if 1.2 million Americans called them right now today or on World Parkinson's Disease on Thursday, we would ban paraquat. Our policymakers are responsive to the needs of their constituents. They don't independently lead, they respond. And if we are not making them respond, we are not making our voices heard. If we make our voices heard, we will change the course of Parkinson's disease. I can't think of a better gift for future generations than to do exactly that.
I really appreciate your time, and also everyone, again, this is doctor's book. Here it is, Ending Parkinson's Disease. Again, I actually read it, so I can vouch for how incredible it is. It helps me every day struggle. I'm still, unfortunately grieving my mother. It's been 4 years, but it kind of just relive it every day. And I'm grateful for your time, for all you do. I don't know if there's any last words or things you wanted to, hopefully it's not the last word. Hopefully we'll be able to continue this discussion even in the future, because I find it's not really just about a half-hour talk. It has to continue until we can end this disease or bring out a lot of the important legal battles that you have mentioned.
It would be great. Listen, your mother, has clearly inspired you. You clearly devoted a large portion of your life to caring for your mother. You've written this outstanding book. It's coming out soon, I think.
Actually, getting the proof in the next 10 minutes, I hope, after we're done. Might be live.
Outstanding. I can't think of a better thing than when people like you and people who are most directly affected with the disease are engaged in efforts to change the course of it. We are underestimating that what we as a community can do, and that underestimation is to our detriment. And the silence around Parkinson's disease needs to end. Michael J. Fox has been at it for 30 years. I mean, his suffering is of biblical proportions. He needs 1.2 million Americans and Canadians and people around the world to join him in the effort to change the course of the disease. If you need to draw inspiration, look at how much that man has suffered, how much he has devoted to changing the course of Parkinson's, how much money he has raised, how much stigma he has reduced. We need to join in the battle that he has led and change the course of Parkinson's disease for future generations in the United States and around the world. And this is something that we can readily accomplish, but we need to end the silence around it. And with the end of silence will be the reduction and end of the suffering that's needless and preventable.
Thank you. And then to conclude every episode, I always end with a little statement. This is from the doctor and myself, but we love you. We support you. We care a lot about you, and you're never alone. We'll both advocate for you, and together our voices are so much stronger. And I always say I'm just getting started, even though I'm not, because when meeting individuals like you or hearing you speak and all the incredible things you do, and even your perspectives that are very critical, you really not just changing others' life, but you definitely changed mine and inspire me to keep fighting. So I just want to thank you and your whole staff, because I know they get a lot of emails from me just because you mean a lot to me. Even now, at least you know me. And the good thing is I'm on the good side of the votes. But I really want to thank you again, sir. And this has been another episode of Q&A with Sharon's son, George. But again, last note, don't forget, purchase the book or reach out to the incredible doctor. And thank you, sir, again. I really appreciate it. It just means the world.
My pleasure and delight, George. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Please share this. And again, we'll resume soon. Please get out there, contact your representatives, local, federal, everybody. We need to end some of these major areas in our environment. I mean, it could be stopped. As an attorney, I could say now, if we have enough people flooding the representatives, believe me, we would put an end to all this. So thank you all. Thank you again.